The state comes so late in the process that most of the governor's agenda actually didn't meet deadlines in the House or the Senate, and it's actually dead here in the legislature. So I would say the governor could have had a more ambitious agenda. I think we really do need to tackle some of the biggest problems that face the state. This state needs permanent, meaningful tax relief back in the pockets of Minnesotans. I would say that Minnesotans are taxed. Approximately, the state is collecting 10% more money right now than we need from taxpayers. We could cut taxes 10% across the board and still meet our demands in state government. And imagine the incentive and the economic benefit that would be to our state's economy if we could do something like that. Unfortunately, the governor is proposing giving back just a minuscule amount of dollars back to Minnesotans, and it's only one-time money. It's not permanent, ongoing tax relief. So I would challenge the governor to be more ambitious, because I think with the resources we have, we can invest back in Minnesotans who will grow our economy, and we can then grow our state in a meaningful way. So I also think the governor has failed to address public safety in a way that I think actually deals with the problems that are facing our state. We have rising crime rates like this state has never seen. And frankly, the governor's proposal of $300 million doesn't do anything to actually hold criminals accountable or recruit more people into law enforcement or support our current law enforcement. And so his proposals on public safety fall woefully short. And I think he could be much more ambitious on that front. And I think on the schools, unfortunately, we need the reforms that will actually get our kids a better education. And Democrats have stood in the way of making sure that those kids get the education they deserve, and we still have the highest achievement gap in this country. And until we solve that problem, we're not going to give these kids the real tools they need to be successful and solve a lot of our problems. And I think Senator Dahms has some comments from this.
Well, I'd just like to say I don't think we really heard anything new tonight. It's kind of talking about the same things we talked about, or he's talked about many, many times. And, you know, as Representative Daudt said, we need to have some reform in education. We hear people talk about changing education. We're going to get this done. We're going to get that done in education. What it really amounts to is people are asking us to put more money into education, but at the end of the day, we need to start with some reform. We're not changing the achievement gap. We're not changing much of anything, yet we keep putting in new money. Last budget, we put in a lot of dollars into the education portion of it, and yet we're here back again today asking for more money. Why are we not asking for reforms? Why are we not doing reforms that will make a change in education? There's a roadblock out there, and we need to get through that. If we're serious about education, we need to step up and be serious and do the things we need to do, and that includes reform, and we're not willing to do that in some factions of the legislative body, and so that has to change. When we get to tax cuts, we really need to get some tax cuts for the folks and get that money out there so that when they get their weekly check or their bi-weekly check, they see some change. When you have a $9.3 billion surplus, it's pretty hard for anybody to look me in the eye and tell me that we're not overtaxing the population. We are overtaxing, and we need to do something to change that. And I think we've got a good program that we're talking about on the Republican side to do some changes in the tax program and to reduce some of those rates that we're using. And we need to take a look at that. And this can't be just one-time money. This has to be a long-term change. And I heard a little tonight about when we first started out, the governor talked about giving some tax cuts to the middle-income folks. That's great. But then he condemned the high-income folks, and he started condemning the corporations. A little bit further down the road, 30 minutes later, he's talking about we got to get the corporations to come to Minnesota and help with the chip problem and help with these different business problems. If we're going to get corporations to come to Minnesota, we need to change the climate. We need to invite them here with the climate that they can live in. 20 minutes later, we're talking, 10 minutes later, we're talking about coming up with some new programs for the 12-week, the 12 weeks that people can stay home and take care of their children, stuff like this. I understand that, but let's let the businesses put that program together. We don't have to have the government put that together and sponsor it. The businesses will do that if that's what's in their best interest. So I think it was a very interesting speech, but like I said, I don't think much has changed. It's kind of what we've been hearing all along.
So Senator.
I want to add too on the unemployment insurance trust fund. The governor needs to show some leadership on that. This issue passed the Senate a month and a half ago, I think, 55 votes, broadly bipartisan. The governor has said publicly he supports it. It's time for him to lean on Democrats in the Minnesota House and get that bill out of here. Tonight, the governor literally referred to that as a tax increase on Minnesota employers. And that's what it is. And if that doesn't happen, Democrats will be forcing a tax increase at a time when our state has an almost $10 billion surplus. It's inexcusable, and it shows a lack of leadership. And with that, we'll take some questions.
55 minutes. Is there anything he said that you agree with other than Minnesota is great?
You know, I think that we believe that we should be returning the surplus to Minnesotans. He said that he wants to do some of that. I'm sure that we would disagree on how much, but let's start with what we agree on and actually start giving some money back to Minnesotans. On the unemployment insurance trust fund, let's refill that. There's a lot of things that I think we can invest in that Minnesotans need, but unfortunately some of those things are being held hostage here in the Minnesota House to try to get partisan ideological wins that just frankly aren't going to happen. And so I would agree with the governor to say let's work on what we can agree on now, but unfortunately that work hasn't happened yet. And here we are with 4 weeks left in session.
Senator Dahms? Well, we passed the unemployment trust fund. We passed it off the Senate floor back on February 14th. And that's been sitting over in the House for attention. And instead of dealing with the unemployment program, they want to attach other things to it. This is a standalone thing. Let's get it done and let's get it taken care of. These businesses got put in a tough position, and they didn't choose that position. That position was put on by government regulations. And so now we're playing games, not giving them that, taking that away. We need to get that federal debt paid off. We need to need to replenish the unemployment account and get this thing moving so that these businesses aren't paying those additional taxes. Like I said, we passed it February 14th. I hope the other side gets busy on it, and I'm talking about the DFL side. They need to take this serious, and let's get it done. We've been at the table. Let's do it.
Other questions?
Senator, you talked about education reform. Do you have any specifics there?
Well, I think there's a lot of things we can do in reform. We've got to take a look at what we need to do in order to change the achievement gap and then start implementing these things. As far as getting into specific details, I'm not going to go into those because we could be here for another half an hour. But there are things that we can be doing. They've been brought up. We've talked about it before. And the amount of putting more money in always outweighs the reform. And so we have to back off and we have to start doing some reform. We're putting plenty of money into education. And now let's just get some reform pieces done.
As far as the final deal is concerned, are you more optimistic, less optimistic, or the same after tonight?
You know, I think we're in the same place. I don't think the governor necessarily helped us get to a final deal tonight. I don't think he necessarily hurt a final deal. Maybe that's a question for the Democrats in the House, because he was also critical of them tonight. So if they're not sore by his comments, maybe we've still got a shot of being about where we were. This week we actually got close to a deal on some of this stuff, but unfortunately Democrats in the House couldn't get all the way there, and so these things now still stand unaccomplished.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.